This is Madia-as Digdigan Buenaflor, extending an invitation to each and every one of you everywhere, as my way of commemorating the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II. I will read and serialize my novel, The Blood of Three, starting on Tuesday, August 27, and continuing episodes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Follow the drama on my YouTube channel. May we forever exhale and inhale love and peace. Chapter 6. Banzai! A dozen Japanese soldiers shouted in unison, facing the huge portrait of Emperor Hiroshi on the wall of Sergeant Mimoto's office, after he concluded his instruction with, "In the name of Emperor Hiroshi." The soldiers marched out of the room, stomping their heavy boots. Sergeant Mimoto sat back, putting his legs on his desk and lighting the cigar in his long pipe. He grinned, confident that his every word would be followed to the letter. He arrived in this garrison just a few days ago, and now he could sit comfortably as long as he wanted, now that he was no longer just a private in the Japanese Imperial Forces. He inhaled and gulped down the aroma of the first-class tobacco he surrendered from the wealthy landlord when he ransacked his estate after raping his wife and only daughter. That was just before he was assigned to this town. He felt great to be able to smoke real vintage tobacco. Taking his pipe between his fingers, he patted the ashes ceremoniously in the ashtray, a Spanish porcelain he had also taken from the landlord. He loved to have expensive objects. This had been an obsession ever since he was a mere private. Just the thought of having been a private made him sick. So, making a swift and swirling turn of his swivel chair, he spat into the nearby wastebasket. He swirled back and resumed his former position, legs crossed on top of the desk. Again he inhaled and blew out the smoke into a circular hollow, following this with his sight as it slowly ascended and disappeared into the air. He raised his ring finger high before him, making the huge ruby stone in his ring sparkle against the glow of his cigar between his lips. "I never have this kind of ring," he murmured. This too he took from that old landlord. Now he had this beautiful ring, a watch with gold chain, and the cigars, a dozen of these. He opened the side drawer of his desk without moving his legs, then took out a brown box. He lifted its lid and relished the scent of the rows of aged cigars. After another sniff of the special aroma, he carefully tucked the box inside the drawer of his desk. "War is good," he mused. He looked up the ceiling and hummed a Japanese melody. "It's nice to be a surgeon," he thought. Now he detested the time when he was a mere private. He was assigned to an inconsiderate, domineering, and egoistic commanding officer. How he hated him. No matter how right he was, his commander always won over him. He still could not fully understand, up to now, why the surgeon found him a very convenient target for his tantrums. Sometimes he thought that perhaps he envied his charm with women. Sergeant Mimoto was in his early 30s. He believed that women were simply attracted to him like bees to honey. Of course, he was tall and well-built, his dark hair kept in place with pomade. His sported sideburns and a big mole accentuated his strong chin. His commanding officer, for one thing, was old and fat, who Sergeant Mimoto called the Old Hog, every time he was reprimanded for making so much noise. Mimoto was an incessant talker, and he was proud of it. He was never short of opinion in everything. Now he realized being an officer, for he could talk as much as he wanted. His English was fairly good, enough to be understood. Again, he inhaled from his long pipe and stretched his arms high. From the distance he heard the greeting of a guard, accompanied by the quick click of his boots as he returned to attention. The greeting was repeated from one guard to the next. Sergeant Mimoto jumped to his feet as the door opened. He sneered. Why should there be a colonel in this office? he murmured. Sergeant Mimoto, the powerful voice rang. Mimoto stood, body erect. I would like to talk in private. Allow no one into my office, he continued, his bearing dignified as he walked to his office at the adjacent room. The name on his door read, Colonel Hiroshi. Sergeant Mimoto bowed again, then walked out of his room without any word, throwing a sharp look at the young man who had come with the colonel. Sergeant Mimoto closed the door behind him with a disgruntled attitude, then walked away the corridor and down the steep stairs, his face stern and body rigid as the guards bowed. This gesture flattered him. This was the other reason that made army life attractive to him. Besides, of course, the looting of precious things and taking of woman at his whim. The colonel sat behind his desk, firm chest out, his uniform crisp and neat. Sit down, Lieutenant Dyson. His voice was deep as he relaxed, brushing his well-trimmed mustache with his ring finger. The young man walked forward and calmly sat down, facing the colonel's desk. He was in his early 20s, about 5'9", robust and fair complexioned. His eyes have the slant, but he was unmistakably Filipino. The colonel smiled, the scar on his right cheek deepening. He was physically fit for one in his 50s and showed he was a man of culture. Your training at our intelligence academy will serve you well, Lieutenant Dyson. Colonel Hiroshi started, his face very serious, yet friendly. The colonel spoke in fluent English with British accent, having studied in England. In fact, he could easily be mistaken for an Englishman whenever his oriental slants were concealed by his dark glasses, which he often wore. We need to procure intelligence of the guerrilla movement in this area of Luzon. Information have reached us of the solidification of their forces now that General MacArthur had returned. We do not have a definitive outcome yet of the encounter in Leyte. Our forces, I'm sure, would stop them at any cost. But in any event, we have to be prepared. We have to get hold of their plans for the next target here in Luzon. There was determination in Colonel Hiroshi's voice. Dyson, his real name Ronaldo Dyson, smiled, nodding with confidence. He projected a serious and disciplined persona, a Filipino who had stayed long in Japan before the war and have some schooling at the Japanese Detective Academy when his father was an instructor there. Upon his father's retirement, their family returned to the Philippines. Soon after, his father died of cardiac arrest. His mother followed a year later from a broken heart. Now, Dyson found it very convenient to work for the Japanese government, having the advantage of Japanese education and the mastery of their language. His alliance with the Japanese assured him of protection and sustenance for his 10 orphan brothers and sisters aging from 5 to 20 who were in Manila. He wanted to spare them from the poverty that his fellow countrymen were suffering and from the torture which the Filipino civilians and guerrillas were being subjected to. I understand from Captain Tagore that he had fully briefed you regarding the specific nature of your mission. Yes, sir. Here are your credentials and other necessary papers. Colonel Hiroshi handed over the papers, all bound by a rubber band. Remember, you are Lieutenant Ronald Dyson of the 12th Battalion, stationed in northern Luzon. The rest you already know. You will join these subversive elements who call themselves guerrillas. Be sure that you are beyond suspicion. You have to report here through the various ways and means to you by intelligence on the guerrilla forces operating in the mountains. Any of their plans for future attacks should be reported to this headquarters at any cost. We should be alerted of any reinforcement, and especially of their plans for the exact site of landing of Allied forces here in Luzon. Colonel Hiroshi uttered every word clearly and deliberately in a very low tone. It is your responsibility to look for and infiltrate these guerrilla units operating in this sector. Yes, sir. Dyson took the handled papers from them, then went through every page. This password will ensure your safety through all our checkpoints. Colonel Hiroshi showed him the card in Japanese writing. Commit this to memory and discard it. Arigato, he smiled after he was sure he had memorized his password. Now you are on your own, Lieutenant Dyson. Colonel Hiroshi extended his right hand to Dyson. Then a quick smile flashed on his face. He grasped Dyson's hand with his other hand and shook briskly. Good luck. Dyson bowed, then turned toward the door. He had the gait of a military man. Colonel Hiroshi regarded him with pride. With a big smile on his face, Colonel Hiroshi turned to the portrait of Emperor Hirohito. Looking at the small Japanese flag on his desk, he nodded, fingering his mustache. He will not fail us, he said as he leaned back on his desk. Dyson had been given several missions before, and he never failed. Colonel Hiroshi knew that the American fleet was coming, and they had prepared for it, but he also knew that the guerrillas were by now preparing to attack and neutralize their fortress in order to clear the passage for the landing fleet. It was Lieutenant Dyson's mission to spoil that plan. Ever since Colonel Hiroshi was assigned to this important Japanese garrison in Luzon, the Japanese have minimized the harassments and sneak attacks of the guerrillas around the area. The last attack was when they were celebrating a national feast day of Japan. Everybody was having a good time, drinking. The sentries were drunk. Colonel Hiroshi was then offering a toast with the other officers when suddenly gunshots rang outside the garrison. The raid was fast, and the guards got unprepared. Although the encounter lasted only for less than 10 minutes, the guerrillas withdrew, leaving 11 Japanese guards dead and a big portion of the garrison guardhouse damaged. It took them almost a week to have the ruins repaired. That one incident impacted on Colonel Hiroshi's policy. Much as he wanted his men to experience some sense of normalcy through occasional fun, from then on, there have not been any celebration of any kind, not even his wedding anniversary, which was a week ago. He remembered having stayed in his room and meditated for some time, asking for good health, clear mind, right judgment, and a long life to spend in peace with his wife and family back in Japan. The day made him nostalgic of home. His wife never missed that special occasion, preparing a small party for their family. Their 3 sons, all married and have children of their own, who also studied in the same school he graduated from in England, always came home for their yearly wedding anniversary. Their 25 years of marriage would have been a grand affair, a happy family reunion. Colonel Hiroshi blinked his eyes to force back the thin mist that had formed there, as he thought of how things would have been. He stood and walked toward the window, his hands clasped together behind him. He looked down at the well-barricaded garrison. It was a strongly secured garrison surrounded by 20-foot-high and 6-foot-thick walls. It would take powerful guns to break through its walls. The fortress towered at 30 feet based on a solid rock beside the sea. It was a well-chosen garrison able to accommodate its machine and manpower. The enclosed area alone was several acres, and a large portion of this was covered with barracks for their soldiers. Arid shelters had been dug near the walls for refuge in case of air attack. The colonel turned and leaned against the window, admiring the beautiful, intricate designs of the ceiling of his office and frescoes of religious images. He felt like being in a sanctuary every time he entered his office. This room was once used by the Spanish priest, for this garrison was once a huge church during the Spanish regime in the Philippines. The other 4 rooms in the rectory were now occupied by the rest of the officers, both as living quarters and offices, while the belfry was used as a watchtower with powerful searchlights. The church itself served as a meeting hall. Colonel Hiroshi turned back to the window and took a deep breath. The air from the sea was fresh and pure, unpolluted even by war. Forward, march! The command from the commanding officer made him look down to the far end of the grounds. Rows of soldiers, thousands of them, marched and went through rigorous training. Hey, Choral growling filled the air as two groups of soldiers simulated a fight with fixed bayonets. Those were the daily activities of those men who stood guard over this formidable stronghold of the Japanese imperial forces. Colonel Hiroshi looked at his watch. It was almost 10 in the morning, and time for his daily inspection. Pressing the crease of his pants and fixing his collar, Colonel Hiroshi quickly walked to the door, saluting every guard as he walked down the steep stairway leading down to the church. Looking around for a quick check, Colonel Hiroshi nodded. He looked back at where the altar was once, and he smiled as he saw the huge Japanese flag covering the entire area 20 feet high. With well-paced strides, Colonel Hiroshi walked out of the big hall, the sound of his footsteps magnified by the huge dome. He paused in front of the Roman facade for a moment and got a good full view of their fortress. Briskly but regally, he walked down the stairs and got in the waiting car. The colonel sat erect and ordered the driver to proceed. As the car passed by the soldiers at drill, the officer in charge barked his order, and the rows of soldiers stood at attention and saluted the colonel. He acknowledged this with a slow, precise salute. The drill resumed as the car passed. "Stop the car," the colonel ordered, watched with approval at the way the soldiers fired at the firing range. He was a sharpshooter himself and had won medals from the academy where he attended. He still did not target practice to keep him sharp with his accuracy. Unable to resist the urge, he alighted from the car and stood beside the line of men. "Hand me your rifle." The soldier turned to his direction. A young soldier handed him his gun. They were all aware of the strict discipline of the colonel. "Thank you." The colonel took hold of the rifle, and before the men could resume their position, the colonel had fired. He shot a series of bullseye which left the men's mouth gaping, both from disbelief and admiration. He returned the rifle without a word and strode calmly back to the car. The soldiers were dumbfounded, remembering to salute him only after his car had sped away. The car slowed down at every gun emplacement which faced the open sea. Every cannon was guarded by two soldiers in round-the-clock rotation. Satisfied at the security all over the garrison, he ordered the driver to return to the church through its rear entrance. The colonel entered the church through a concrete stairway, then turned to the right where the baptismal font was situated. This area was separated by steel bars. He entered an opening beside it, just beneath the side altar, and walked down the stairway cut from solid rock. He turned right, passing through a hallway, solidly walled on the left and filled with old ornaments and statues of saints at its right. After walking about a couple of 100 feet, he stopped before a huge twin door guarded by two soldiers. The guards were about to open the doors, but the colonel signaled them not to. He already felt the heat and the lack of fresh air. He quickly retraced his way back up, confident of the maximum security at the basement. His long inspection finished, the colonel got back to his car, flashing a smile that made him turn pink with no effort at all. Fixing his uniform, the colonel leaned back, crossing his right leg, folded his arms, and relaxed. The car sped away, this time to the officers' mess hall. It was almost 12 noon. That's all for today, to be continued on Tuesdays and Thursdays. May we all forever exhale and inhale love and peace. Thanks for being with me today. I hope you will inspire me with a like, share, and subscribe.